The letter trembled in Emma's hands, as if it carried fire instead of ink. She had waited years for this envelope, yet the weight of it crushed her chest. Her father's last words bled through her memory, promising courage even when loneliness was the cost. Emma whispered, "I cannot fail him now." She pressed her palm to her father's, scuffed old key resting on the table, the one he told her never to throw away. Her breath caught, because inside this paper was her second chance, but it also meant everyone would remember her first fall. Daniel said, "Emma, open it. You've carried this ghost too long." She glanced at him, his voice steady but his eyes cautious, knowing the world had given up on her once already. The room swelled with silence as the seal tore, and her eyes scanned the words that could free her or bind her forever. Emma said, "They gave it back. The job, the dignity, the name I almost buried." The cost was written between the lines though, prove herself without slipping or lose more than her future. She clenched her jaw, tears slipping before she could stop them. Emma said, "I will not let him down." And the promise made at a hospital bedside years ago roared back to life inside her chest. Morning arrived gray and heavy, and Emma traced the ink again with her eyes as though it might vanish if she blinked. Her father's voice echoed, "Courage even when you're alone." Daniel said, "Emma, this is not just about you anymore. It's about proving that broken does not mean finished." She held the letter tighter, remembering the hospital room where her father had whispered his plea with a fading breath. The hallway clock ticked louder than her pulse, reminding her every second she delayed was another second of doubt. Emma whispered, "I promised him, and I'll carry it." Daniel sighed, "Then carry it without fear." She folded the letter neatly, sliding it into her coat pocket, and stepped toward the door. The world outside would not welcome her back easily, but her father's ghost would never forgive her if she chose silence over courage. The street smelled of rain, the pavement glistening under the pale morning sky. Emma's footsteps echoed like defiance, each strike a reminder that returning meant battle. Daniel said, "You could walk away now, and no one would blame you." She replied, "But I would blame me." Her gaze fell on the corner cafe where she once laughed with colleagues, who no longer spoke her name. Memories pressed heavy against her chest. Emma muttered, "They'll see me differently or not at all." Daniel followed quietly, his silence proof he understood the cost. She adjusted her coat, whispering to herself, "This is my beginning again." Emma paused in front of the office building, its glass facade reflecting a life she had been exiled from. Daniel said, "This is the place where they took your name away." Emma replied, "And where I will take it back." The revolving doors spun endlessly, strangers passing through without pause, each face a reminder of time lost. She clutched her pocket, the folded letter pressing against her ribs. Emma whispered, "I will walk in as the woman my father believed in, not the one they left behind." Her chest rose with sharp defiance. Daniel muttered, "Then don't flinch." Inside the lobby, polished marble floors stretched beneath fluorescent lights that hummed with indifference. Emma's footsteps echoed, fragile yet unbroken. Daniel said, "They'll remember your mistakes first." Emma replied, "Then I'll make them remember my strength after." The receptionist glanced up briefly, recognition flickering across her face before slipping into professional coldness. Emma inhaled sharply, her father's promise echoing, courage even when alone. She stepped forward, her voice firm, "I'm here to reclaim what I lost." Daniel watched silently, knowing this moment was the true beginning. The air in the office buzzed with whispered judgments, each sound pressing against Emma's ribs like invisible fists. She walked forward, shoulders squared, though her pulse hammered like thunder in her throat. Daniel said, "Every eye here measures you." Emma replied, "Then let them." Her gaze landed on Sarah, the HR manager who had once signed the letter of termination. Sarah's expression remained calm, but her eyes narrowed with recognition. Emma said, "Good morning. I'm here to confirm my reinstatement." Sarah replied, "Policies demand proof, Emma. Second chances require more than words." Emma's jaw tightened and she whispered, Then I will show proof every day if I must. The hallway clock ticked, mocking her with every second. Daniel said softly, "Do not let her silence bend you." Emma nodded, her father's key pressing against her chest like a shield. Emma sat in a chair across from Sarah's desk, the polished wood gleaming under overhead lights that felt more like interrogation lamps. Sarah said, "You understand your past will not vanish. Every mistake will echo until you prove otherwise." Emma's throat tightened, but she forced the words out. "I'm not asking for erasure. I'm asking for a chance to rewrite what follows." Daniel sat silently at her side, his posture rigid, his jaw clenched against the weight of the moment. Sarah tapped her pen against the desk, eyes steady. "This is not mercy. It is a contract of consistency. Break it once and the door closes forever." Emma nodded, voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "Then I will not break." Her father's voice whispered again, reminding her that dignity was worth the cost of solitude. Papers slid across the desk like blades, contracts spelling out her probation. Sarah said, "Sign here, and every step forward must be flawless." Emma hesitated, pen trembling between her fingers. "Oh." Daniel whispered, "You don't have to accept chains to prove freedom." Emma replied, "These aren't chains. They're the price of my father's promise." She pressed the pen to the page, ink bleeding like veins across the form. Sarah watched without expression, though her eyes softened for a fleeting second before returning to steel. Emma whispered, "This is my vow. I will not fail." The silence that followed was heavier than applause. The elevator doors closed with a metallic sigh, trapping Emma and Daniel in mirrored silence. Emma clutched the signed papers, their weight heavier than stone. Daniel said, "You just agreed to be watched like a criminal." Emma replied, "No, I agreed to prove I'm more than a record." Her reflection in the elevator glass stared back, pale but fierce. She whispered, "Every rule, every test, I'll meet it." Daniel muttered, "Even if they never forgive." Emma answered, "I'm not here for their forgiveness. I'm here for my father's." The descent felt endless, each floor a reminder of battles ahead. Outside, the city roared as if mocking her fragile victory. Rain streaked down glass towers, and pedestrians hurried past without notice. Emma stood still, papers pressed to her chest like armor. Daniel said, "This was only the first step." Emma whispered, "And the hardest." She glanced skyward, rain mixing with the tears she refused to wipe. Her father's words pulsed inside. Courage, even when the cost is loneliness. She took a slow step forward, shoes splashing into a shallow puddle, and said, "Let them test me. I am ready." Daniel walked beside her, silent but present, as the storm swallowed their figures into the city's endless noise. Emma sat in the cafeteria at a corner table, the low hum of voices pressing like judgment. A tray sat untouched before her, food cooling as her thoughts boiled hotter than coffee. Daniel said, "You should eat, you'll need strength." Emma replied, "Strength won't come from food, it comes from proving I deserve to be here." At the far side of the room, an older man with a lined face and weary posture nodded toward her. His name was Michael, a retired supervisor brought back to train newcomers. Michael said, "You'll need more than grit, girl. You'll need patience, and that's rarer than talent." Emma stared, unsure if he was mocking or mentoring. She whispered, "I can listen." Michael smirked faintly, "Then start by surviving the room that watches you." His words cut sharp, but his presence held no malice, only weathered truth. Daniel muttered, "Looks like you found someone who won't let you lie." Emma thought of her father and how he would have trusted the man who spoke with scars in his tone. Michael slid into the seat across from Emma, his eyes steady, voice low enough to slice through the noise without effort. Michael said, "They'll test you, not in ways written on paper, but in looks, in silence, in doors half shut." Emma tightened her grip on her fork. She replied, "Let them. I'm not afraid of eyes." Michael shook his head. "It's not their eyes, it's your reflection in them. You'll fight yourself more than them." Daniel said, "He's right. You've battled ghosts before, Emma. But now the ghosts have names. Emma exhaled hard, her hands shaking as though echoing his truth. She whispered, I promised my father I would not turn back, even if the ground trembles beneath me. Michael leaned back, his expression unreadable, then said softly, Promises are only as strong as the days you honor them. Later, in the training room, Emma faced a screen filled with procedures she once knew but had been forced to relearn. Michael stood at the front, pointing sharply at slides. Michael said, Rules change, Emma. Memory isn't loyalty. It's only half the battle. Emma scribbled notes furiously, sweat beading her temple. Daniel whispered, You're pushing too hard. She shot him a look, saying, I have no choice. Michael paced the room, pausing near her desk. He muttered, You burn fast, you burn out. Pace yourself or you'll prove the doubters right. Emma whispered back, I will not give them that gift. Her pen tore slightly through the page, leaving scars in the paper that matched her resolve. During the break, a figure leaned against the vending machine, a smirk curling his lips. His name was Ryan, a former colleague, and now her rival. Ryan said, Back again, Emma? Thought the door was shut for good. Emma froze, her chest tightening. She replied, Doors don't stay closed if you keep knocking. Ryan laughed sharply. Knock too long, and they call it desperation. Daniel stepped in, voice clipped. She's not here to beg, she's here to prove. Ryan leaned closer, lowering his tone. Careful, Daniel. Proof cuts both ways. Fail once and it sticks forever. Emma held his gaze, fire burning behind her calm. She whispered, Then I'll bleed for it if I must. That evening, Emma sat by the window of her small apartment, the city's glow flickering against glass. Daniel placed tea beside her, his silence softer than words. Emma whispered, He tried to remind me of failure, but I reminded myself of promise. Daniel said, Ryan feeds on doubt. Don't give him that power. Emma traced her father's key, metal worn smooth from years of keeping. She whispered, This key is not just memory, it's a demand. Daniel replied, Then keep unlocking doors until even he cannot close them. She leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her frame, yet the fire in her chest burned steady. Emma stood frozen in the records room, the faint hum of fluorescent bulbs filling the silence. A folder lay open before her, its pages filled with reports about her dismissal. She whispered, This doesn't match what they told me. Daniel leaned closer, his brow furrowed. What are you seeing? Emma's fingers traced a line of ink, words that shifted blame onto her, though the data proved otherwise. Michael entered quietly, his voice gravelly. Now you see why truth bends for convenience. Emma snapped. They framed me? Michael said, Not framed, Emma, sacrificed. Someone needed to pay, and you were the cheapest cost. Her chest tightened, rage clawing against the edges of her composure. Daniel muttered, So the choice was never about failure, it was about survival. Emma whispered, My father died believing I failed. That lie stole his peace. The folder trembled in her hands as the weight of betrayal fused with her vow. Emma slammed the folder shut, her breath sharp echoing in the small space. She said, They stole my name to protect their own. Michael sighed. That's how the system survives, by swallowing one life to shield another. Daniel's fists tightened, his voice low. Then we fight it. We show them this paper proves they chose lies over truth. Emma whispered, But truth won't heal my father. It won't bring back his faith. Michael stepped closer, his tone steady. No, but it will restore yours. Her eyes blurred with anger and grief, memories of her father's hand squeezing hers in his hospital bed, piercing through. She said, I swore courage, even when the cost was loneliness. I never swore silence. The words landed heavier than any oath, echoing against steel cabinets, as if even the walls had heard. That evening, Emma sat with the folder spread open on her small kitchen table, documents scattered like broken glass. Daniel poured coffee, his silence carved from worry. He said, If you reveal this, they'll bury you again. Emma replied, If I stay silent, I bury myself. Her voice cracked but steadied, each word a step toward defiance. She touched her father's old key, whispering, he believed in truth, not shadows. Daniel lowered his eyes. Then this isn't just about a job. It's about justice. Emma said, justice that costs me friends, comfort, maybe everything. She leaned back, exhaustion woven into resolve. But I'd rather be alone with truth than embraced by lies. The folder lay between them, a battlefield drawn in ink and memory. The next morning, Emma carried the folder into Sarah's office. The blinds filtered cold light across the desk, painting harsh lines across the polished wood. Sarah looked up, her eyes sharpening. Emma placed the folder down, voice steady. You knew this truth. Sarah's lips pressed thin, her silence heavier than denial. Daniel, standing near the door, said, this proves Emma wasn't at fault. Sarah replied coldly, truth doesn't always matter to policy. Emma shot back, it matters to dignity, and it matters to the promise I made my father. Sarah's gaze flickered, the first crack in her guarded composure. She whispered, even if you're right, this fight will ruin you. Emma leaned forward, her jaw locked. Then let it. I would rather be ruined by truth than built by lies. Emma walked out of the office, folder clutched to her chest like a weapon, her steps ringing down the corridor. Daniel hurried beside her, whispering, you just declared war. Emma replied, no, I declared truth. Michael waited near the elevators, his gaze searching her face. He said, you've chosen the harder road. Emma nodded, her voice calm. It's the only road that leads anywhere worth walking. The silence of the hallway swallowed their words, but Emma felt her father's voice stronger than ever, echoing within her chest. She whispered, courage even when the cost is loneliness. The phrase no longer burned, it steadied her like steel. Emma stood at the edge of the boardroom table, folder in her grip like a blade. Executives lined the seats, their polished suits and indifferent eyes forming a wall. Sarah said, you will regret this. Emma replied, I regret silence more. Daniel stood by the door, tension sharp across his shoulders. Michael's words from before echoed, patience is rarer than talent. Emma opened the folder, spreading the documents across the polished surface. These papers prove I was not the failure you painted me as. They prove you sacrificed me to protect yourselves. Murmurs filled the room, sharp as knives. Sarah said, this will not end the way you think. Emma whispered, it will end the way it must. Her father's key weighed in her pocket, reminding her that dignity was worth scars. Emma's voice did not tremble, though her hands still shook. You built your careers on a lie, and you let my father die, believing I failed. A silence heavier than thunder filled the room. Daniel whispered from the back, keep going. Sarah's face remained stone, but her eyes betrayed cracks of unease. One executive said, if what she claims is true, these documents are damning. Emma replied firmly, they are not claims. They are evidence. She slid the final page forward, the inked signatures revealing who authorized her fall. Her breath caught as gasps broke the silence. This is my truth, and I will not bury it again. Sarah rose slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. She said, you've just signed away your chance at peace. Emma stared, voice low but steel-edged. Peace bought with silence isn't peace. It's prison. Daniel stepped forward, his presence steady but his face pale. One executive muttered, this could ruin us. Michael entered the room, his timing deliberate, his eyes on Emma. He said, or it could finally redeem us. Sarah glared. You should have stayed out of this. Michael replied, I've seen too many truths buried. Not this time. Emma whispered, I will carry this, no matter the cost. Her father's words echoed louder than the storm outside. The storm outside rattled the glass walls as Emma's decision reached its peak. She said, this truth will stand even if it destroys me. Sarah replied, then you will burn alone. Daniel's voice cracked, she won't be alone. Michael nodded, Not as long as truth breathes in this room. Emma felt her chest steady, her father's voice stronger than the thunder. She whispered, "Courage even when the cost is loneliness." I knew what it meant when I swore it. Executives shifted uneasily. Silence louder than protest. Sarah finally sat back down, her face pale, and muttered, "So be it." Emma walked out of the boardroom into the storm, her hair dampening as rain lashed against her face. Daniel followed, silent but loyal. Michael's steps echoed behind them, steady and grounding. Emma whispered, "The cost has been paid, but I still breathe." Daniel said, "You chose the hard road." Emma replied, "It was the only road that kept my father's promise alive." The city roared with thunder, but she lifted her chin, her folder pressed to her chest. She whispered again, "I am not finished. This is only the beginning." Her father's key clinked softly in her pocket, a sound that felt like victory and mourning at once. The morning after the storm, Emma sat at her kitchen table, the folder no longer a weapon, but a weight. Coffee steamed untouched beside her hand. Daniel said, "You cracked the surface, but the fight will come harder now." Emma whispered, "I didn't fight for applause. I fought for truth." Michael leaned against the counter, his tired face lined by shadows. He said, "They'll push back, Emma. They'll paint you reckless. You'll need proof every step." Emma looked at the brass key resting beside her cup. She said, "This is my anchor. Every scar, every lonely step, it means I didn't quit." Daniel muttered, "You'll lose people." Emma replied, "Better to lose people than lose myself." Her father's voice pressed in, steady as heartbeat, courage even when the cost is loneliness. The silence after was heavier than words. At work, whispers followed Emma like shadows. Colleagues glanced then turned away, their silence sharp as knives. Ryan smirked from his desk saying, "Truth doesn't always make friends." Emma replied, "I didn't come here for friends." Sarah passed by, her expression unreadable but her voice clipped. "Every mistake from now on will be blood on your hands." Emma said, "Then I'll bleed clean." Daniel muttered, "They want to watch you stumble." Emma whispered back, "Then I'll walk steadier." Michael watched from across the floor, nodding faintly, his silent approval grounding her like stone. Each keystroke at her desk felt louder, as though she typed defiance into every line. During lunch, Emma sat alone in the break room. Ryan entered, leaning casually against the counter. Ryan said, "You really think one folder changes history?" Emma stared, voice sharp, "It changes mine." He laughed, "They'll chew you up again, Emma, and I'll be here to watch." Daniel entered behind him, eyes narrowed. "Back off," he said. Ryan smirked, "I'm just reminding her that truth doesn't erase reputation." Emma replied, "Then let reputation choke. I'll breathe in truth." Michael stepped in, his tone firm. "Enough. Every man in this room knows she's fighting for more than herself." Ryan's smirk faltered as silence cut deeper than threats. Later that week, Emma received an envelope slid onto her desk. Inside was a typed note, "Leave now before you destroy yourself." Her hands trembled, but her face hardened. Daniel whispered, "They're trying to break you." Emma said, "I've already been broken. Now I build." Michael read the note, shaking his head. "Cowards hide behind paper. You answer with persistence." Sarah approached, her eyes locked on Emma. She said, "Do you know what you're risking?" Emma replied firmly, "I know exactly, and I accept." Sarah's gaze softened for only a moment before she walked away. Emma pressed the note flat against the desk, her chest rising with fire. That night, Emma stood on her apartment balcony overlooking the city lights, wind tugging at her hair. Daniel joined her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. He said, "You've lit a fire you can't put out." Emma whispered, "Good. Fires burn shadows away." Michael's voice from earlier rang in her head, "Patience is rarer than talent." She whispered again, "Then I'll be patient, and I'll burn steady." Daniel said, Even if the city turns against you? Emma replied, even then, especially then. Her father's key pressed against her palm, warm despite the night chill. She whispered into the wind, I'm not afraid of the cost anymore. The city did not answer, but its silence felt like witness. Emma walked through the office lobby, her steps echoing against marble, the whispers of colleagues trailing her like shadows. Some eyes carried suspicion, others a flicker of respect. Daniel said, they are watching to see if you fall again. Emma replied, then I will let them watch me rise. Sarah stood near the reception, her posture rigid, eyes following Emma as if measuring her against the past. Michael waited at the door, his face calm but his eyes heavy with pride. Emma whispered, I carried the lie long enough. Now I carry the truth. The brass key pressed warm in her palm, a reminder of her father's faith. Each step toward the door felt like walking out of a cage. Oh. Outside, the city was alive, neon lights spilling into puddles left by last night's rain. Emma stood still, staring at the horizon where dawn crept pale and fragile. Daniel said, you've shaken the ground they built on. Emma whispered, then let them rebuild on truth. Michael's voice was steady, you've done more than many dared. Sarah stepped out behind them, her voice low, I don't forgive you, but I cannot deny you. Emma turned, her eyes sharp. I never asked for forgiveness. I asked for dignity. The air thickened with silence, heavy as the storm that had passed. Emma walked toward the cafe she once avoided, the memory of old laughter still clinging to its walls. Inside, a few former colleagues glanced up, their stares uncertain. Daniel said softly, you don't need to prove anything here. Emma replied, I need to prove it to myself. She ordered coffee with a steady voice, ignoring the whispers at nearby tables. Michael entered and took a seat quietly, nodding toward her cup. He said, normal moments, Emma, they matter more than victories. She nodded, her hand resting over the key in her pocket. I can breathe here, she whispered, and for the first time, it felt true. That evening, Emma returned to her apartment balcony, the city stretching beneath her like a sea of lights. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice quiet, you carried this weight farther than most could. Emma replied, because I was never walking for me alone. Michael's words earlier echoed, patience is rarer than talent. She whispered, and I am patient. Her father's voice filled the silence. Courage, even when the cost is loneliness. Emma pressed the key to her chest and whispered, I paid the cost, and I remain. Daniel's eyes softened, his silence a vow to stand beside her. The next morning, Emma stood before her mirror, the reflection no longer fractured. She whispered, second chances aren't free. I paid in full. Daniel entered the room, watching her with quiet pride. Michael's voice echoed faintly in her memory, promises are honored in days, not speeches. Emma touched the key resting at her neck on a chain, her father's promise alive in its weight. She smiled faintly, not of relief, but of resolve. The silence carried her words beyond the room. She had chosen truth, chosen courage, chosen loneliness when needed, and found strength. The story was not over, but she was no longer afraid of its cost.